Bill, do you know any computer specialists who would like to come and set up my new computer? It just arrived today.
What did you get?
That's a
An
good
Apple
question.
or a
No, it's a Locomo or something like that.
Lenovo?
Yes.
Where'd you get it?
From the folks that are the technical guys for Windows.
Oh,
The Lenovo is the old IBM brand, actually. It's now
Oh.
made in China. Chinese company bought the IBM laptop business. Well, actually, I guess not only the laptop, but the PC. They bought the whole
Yeah.
personal computer.
gotta
and
make these.
Supposed to be pretty good.
IBM now, their software is much bigger part of their business than their hardware.
Yeah.
They write software for all the insurance companies, banks, and all those places.
The only guy I know is an Apple expert. And he is an expert, but there's no sense. I mean, he's not an expert.
There's that, I've never used them, but I've heard people speak highly of them, that Geek Squad.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're probably a little more expensive than an individual, but I think they're,
I don't.
have training and things.
I don't wanna fool around with the disconnecting and connecting and,
I don't blame you. Believe me, it took my son a little while. I bought my wife a new computer, so it was a mistake. Having bought it, my son-in-law came out and he said, oh, well, it's really easy to recommend it when you get a new wireless, higher speed wireless, because I have Fios, so I'll up to speed. But to make a long story short, it took him all afternoon talking
it was really easy.
to Verizon to get it to work.
Uh-huh.
And the computer is really easy. I mean, my wife's having trouble only because change comes hard. But, we'll probably, I don't know. It's got a bunch of stuff on it that's cheap.
Well, you can get a flash drive and
And we can. but
transfer it over, they
that's
say.
Sufficiently far away from her comfort zone at this stage.
So right now, if you wanna zip down to Staples, they're for $5.
What?
They've got flash drives for $5.
Oh, Staples, they have a software service center too,
That's true,
but it's just service, I don't think they'll come to your house.
probably not.
But the Geek Squad.
Okay, it being 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with old and new business. So let's start 557 Haverhill. And they are gonna file, Chuck?
Yep, I met with them today,
Okay.
and we got the paperwork started, and they'll be on our next agenda.
Okay, and they're just gonna file a RDA.
And after the fact, RDA for some work that's been completed already.
That's the one where they did a little bit of grading and put up a new deck,
Put
right?
up a new deck, they took down a couple of trees.
Well, that was a question, was it trees or stumps? We think it might have been
Well,
stumps.
she told me today, I asked her that exact question, there was a tree up front that was, I guess, falling over, so they pulled that one out
In the front of the
in the
house?
front of the house.
But that's probably outside of the buffer zone.
Well, there's a drainage channel right there, so.
Because you remember that channel wraps kind of around behind the other house?
Oh, it goes next to that, yeah, okay.
And then
But-
there's two trees that, so there's a fence left to do and two more trees to take down. But if those trees fall and they're in striking distance of the house and they're leaning, and
Yeah,
So-
well,
that's the decision.
okay, we'll do that RDA when it's get. We have the minutes for, last meeting. Give everybody 30 seconds in case they haven't had the chance to read it. And we can vote on these because all of us were at that meeting.
Oh, that's right.
Do you need a copy, James?
I thought I looked at them online, but I
Here
might
you
be
go.
thinking of the wrong week. Here, here's my copy. I'm good.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Okay, minutes are approved. We have an RDA closeout for 149 Walnut Street. Three of us did do a site visit. The property is in good shape. In addition to the saving of the trees that were so indicated, they actually were able to save an additional tree. They cleaned up the backyard. They have a one-season hockey rink out there. Seems to be fine. I'll entertain a motion to close out the RDA request.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I have never seen this property, so I really probably shouldn't second.
Oh, okay. You
I'll
seconded?
second it,
Okay,
sorry.
fine. That's all right. All those in favor? Okay, you're not voting because you haven't seen the property.
If he doesn't vote, then
You can't do it.
can't do it.
I mean, it's up to you, Tom.
I'll vote.
Okay.
Fine.
Let the record show that Tom trusted his colleagues. Okay. Pearl Street gas line maintenance. We did not drive on Pearl Street simply because we've all been on Pearl Street, and it appears that the area that is initially going to be dealt with is not particularly in the resource
Right.
area. Or near a resource area. Now, my understanding is that they're gonna replace much of the cast iron in town, is that
That's
the
right.
ultimate plan?
There's a list of roads that are gonna come up
You sent us, I think, a copy of that
Yep.
list, and they said they would file RDAs as.
for the ones that need it.
Well, Track Road is one that needs it, and there was another one that caught my attention last night beside Track Road. Oh, was it Willow Street?
Yeah, it's Willow Street.
Willow Street.
Yeah, I think what they're going to do is just review it themselves. This was more of, hey, there's still some good weather, we can still work out there.
Right.
And they wanted to put this one, which they thought there were no issues on, in front of us, just to make sure.
Are they using PVC type material for the new
Yeah,
pipe?
they're going for they're doing two things. One is to use the 60 PSI plastic, and the second is in some places, they appear to be substituting high-pressure 60 PSI pipe for a old low-pressure main, both of which are probably sensible things to replace.
How are they patching the road?
Well,
They're-
I can tell you what
Like
they
they
did on
always
Wilson
do.
Street, okay? And what they appear to have done is dug a trench in the middle of the road, removed the gas line, installed a new one, and patched over it, okay? It looks like a relatively,
Is it a temporary patch, or,
Well,
I mean, it will be, whether
it's like the
whether
one
they
on,
intended to be or not.
it's
I
like the
mean-
one on West Street, temporary patch, it's been there 6 years.
No, I'm just saying the material in the cold weather will not, it's
Right.
junk.
I understand that, and they have,
So, I mean, will they be going back to make a permanent
we
patch?
have.
There's
no
a policy in
information.
town where if it's gonna drop below a certain amount, so it makes a crater, they have to go back and look at those. But it can drop a little bit, and that's still fine. So do they usually go back? No. It's
I
what
mean,
you
I think
ask,
that-
what you get.
I think the real issue we ought to do on this one is to ask engineering to make sure to do some follow-up. Come spring.
It sounded to me last night as if they were coordinating with George in his plan for
They're
resurfacing,
doing
so
some.
that it tries to
Right.
work like this.
There is some of that going on. It's not at all clear that, it's all gonna be that way. And I think we just need to, it seems to me, two things. One, as we get into resource areas which are our jurisdiction, we gotta make sure we check very carefully. I think the second thing that we need to do is to urge engineering to follow up after the work is done. And, George, a couple of years ago, when George was testifying here, he said, what everybody knows, which is that once you cut asphalt, you basically have destroyed its weather tightness and,
Right.
there's
You
no-
violated its integrity.
Right, and there's no, even with hot patch in the best conditions, you still probably don't get it. But apparently, according to Peter's comments last night at the selectmen's meeting, there has been some coordination, therefore some of the mains, will be done, prior to repaving. Any other comments or questions on the Pearl Street gas line? Okay. Well,
Chuck, our agenda lists both hearings at 7:20. When it was posted on the web, was one of them listed as 7:10?
no, they're both listed at 7:20. Unfortunately, one of them should have been 7:10, but we got two 7:20 hearings. So those of you who are waiting, we have a legal responsibility to wait till 7:20, simply because that's what the posting says. It's not that.
Oh, great.
There's not, that's all right,
Yeah.
what's the cut
Let's
in the
talk
lip?
about the regulations.
Do you want to tackle vernal pools? Do you think we can do it
Yeah,
in 10
why don't we
minutes?
Yeah.
Take the vernal pool. from-
Barbara, that thing you showed us Sunday, is that the same thing that was in our packet?
Except for my handwritten,
Yeah, Chuck sent out the vernal pool list that I had rewritten essentially. And Barbara, why don't you tell us what you had suggested? This is just regulation stuff, and we'd normally cover it after the hearings, but since we have to
Kill 10
consume
minutes.
10 minutes, since, God forbid we violate the open meeting law.
What was your addition? I remember basically what it was, but
She, want me to do it?
go right ahead.
At the bottom of what Bill put in, she wrote, for further information and questions, call the Division
Right.
of Fish and Wildlife, and she put the number down.
Okay, do we wanna add that, or do we wanna add their website?
It's,
I'm just asking, I don't,
yeah, the website, that would be helpful, and Fish and Wildlife /National Heritage.
yeah, you had Fish and Wildlife National Heritage, didn't you?
Nope, just Fish and Wildlife.
Are
Well, it is the same.
hang on a second, Tom?
are we trying to establish a definition or write a section on vernal pools?
We are writing, what I'm proposing is what I wrote, which is essentially to say, here's a little bit about vernal pools, number one, and the town of Reading accepts the current requirements, definitions, and regulatory restrictions as specified by, okay?
So this is the definition, this isn't the restriction on vernal pool.
Right, it's
Right.
whatever the state says it is as of January 1, 2012. And the reason I chose that and put it in specifically was that, this way, if if there's a revision in the restrictions definition or so on by the state, we ought to review it based on our understanding.
The January 1st, 2012 date comes from where, though? From,
January 1st date, 2012, comes from the fact that I wrote this shortly after January 1st, 2012. It's the current, whatever is the current in-force revision. My view, Tom, is that we don't know what the state will or will not do about this. I am happy with the definitions as of that date, and I figured putting that date in didn't do us any damage. It gives us the possibility of saying, if they do change the definitions or restrictions, we at least ought to review it. And, change, if we agree, change the date. If we don't agree, that's a different question. I was simply giving us a marker to say the definitions as of this date are comfy.
understood.
Yep.
I thought in the last meeting that we were trying to come up with a definition, and it appears from this type of general paragraph on the front about an interpretation of vernal pools, and then a paragraph again that kind of mixes up some stuff here and defines it, and then we're sending them to a web page for more information. That's a section, it's not a definition. I think the
And then,
Wetlands Protection Act offers a pretty good definition with, if we wanted to add, and I've written something here if you want to review it, referencing the person to the Natural Heritage Program. This Mass Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program is actually a program or a group of people that are one part of the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. So it's not a matter of the definition of regulatory restrictions as specified by Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program or by the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. They're one and the same.
Okay.
The CMR is actually, I think it's 321 CMR 10 that the definition is for. There is not an 800, so I think this is supposed to be 8. But 8 is actually just a very brief little single page thing that talks about state list of endangered wildlife and wild plants.
okay.
I believe it's section 10, that is the Code of Regulations, Massachusetts Endangered Species Act regulations. I just printed this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing. It's
Okay.
at least 57 pages. So I haven't found the definition in here or found some of that stuff, but what I'm suggesting is that we just define a vernal pool. I think the definition in the Wetlands Protection Act adds a bit of a context to it. At the end of the definition, it says these areas are essentially breeding habitat, provide other extremely important wildlife habitat functions during non-breeding season as well for a variety of amphibian species. And that goes on to list a whole bunch of different things, the wood frog, salamander, and others that you'd find in these types of, vernal pools.
But I guess maybe the issue is here a definition as opposed to what qualifies it as a vernal pool and therefore necessitates the protection provided a vernal pool.
Yep, and that, I think, is very well laid out in that checklist that Chuck gave us the link to. There's like 3 or 4 pages of
Right.
what it is, why it's important, who protects it, and
Right.
then into instructions on how to document, and then a form that you need to fill out to document.
Right.
So I think there's quite a bit of resource information already available. I'm not sure that we need to repeat that or try to interpret that in our regulation. And we just define a vernal pool in Redding's definition. As we had talked last time, I think some of the problems we had with the definition were, eligible, potential, however you want to word that. So what I'm saying is that the person be required to actually file with Natural Heritage. document, fill out the form,
Well,
and
I think
file.
one of the things though that we talked about last time, and maybe we won't be able to settle it tonight, was the question of, did we wanna protect vernal pools whether or not they were filed, whether they were certified?
Officially listed.
Well, there's a difference between certified and filed, and in
Right.
my opinion, eligible.
Well, that's right.
Three different things.
Right, I would agree with you.
Right.
There are those that have not been filed, which may be eligible.
That's right. And someone needs to look at that to make that.
I don't think we
Determination.
can ask the applicant to file for vernal pool certification.
Well, someone needs to.
I disagree. I don't think anyone needs to. I think that if it's on the list, if it's certified, that's it. It's a vernal pool.
That's
No
easy.
question.
And that would mean that it's already been filed.
It's already been filed, it's already been certified, so that's no
Yeah.
question. The second category, if there is a vernal pool out there that nobody's ever bothered to look at, we, as the Conservation Commission and our agent, would be required to determine whether or not it's eligible. And if it is, then my suggestion is it would warrant the same protection under the Reading Wetland Bylaw as a certified pool.
And I would agree with that and go one step further, though, that we should file the paperwork with Natural Heritage.
We,
so
the
that they can
Conservation Commission?
Sure, so that they can confirm our determination and our field work.
I think that's appropriate, but I'm not sure we can hold up the application until that process is complete, because it could be months.
But, okay.
But on the flip side of that, we would hold the applicant responsible for something that we're not actually sure is a vernal pool, because I mean we would be stripping them of their rights because we think something is out there,
Right, and,
and that's the rub on this issue is this eligibility.
yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound as if we could solve that one immediately, only because there are four of us and we have to have a unanimous.
Well,
consensus.
one thing we could do is, as we do in, like soil test, we could make the determination, either commission, the agent, or if we hired a private consultant, we can make that determination. The applicant would always have the option of going to their professional to contest what we did. I don't know if, I assume we could put that in the regulations.
I think we have that option for review, pretty broadly anyway. So
Right.
I think it would be available. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we're down to this area where we need to be absolutely sure, there's gonna be a lot of times when you find, the egg sacs and you know that it's breeding habitat, that's gonna be easy and no one's gonna contest it, and it's pretty much, in the bank, that's fine. But if you don't find anything obvious, what are you gonna do about it?
Or if it's at the wrong time of the year.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah. Because in fact, you can only really determine it in spring breeding.
Right.
Tom, I'm still a little confused on what you would have us do in lieu of, what was granted.
Well, I think the previous section in the regulation regarding vernal pools dealt with some description,
Right.
performance standards,
Right. And we-
very in-depth list of things
And
that.
we propose to take that all out.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Take it all out and insert a new definition for a vernal pool. Because the definition that's currently in the regulations does not jive with the proposed description that we were given on Friday or Saturday.
You mean that first paragraph?
Yeah, there's a definition in Reading's regulation that is different than
No,
that description.
right, what I'm suggesting, Tom, is the following. And maybe I wasn't clear about this, and that is that we remove the existing definitions entirely. We remove the existing regulations entirely. We say that, simply in the manner of description, that here's what vernal pools are in a layman's way. And we accept the requirements, definitions, and regulatory restrictions as specified. by Natural Heritage, Endangered Species Program, and that should be of the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife under, it looks like 310 CMR -10. All vernal pools currently listed as certified by Natural Heritage and those that meet the criteria as so defined are protected by the local regulations. That would be substitute for all of the existing definition, all of the existing words in the current regulation, ready.
And where would it go? In a definitions or in a section?
It would go in a section.
That's the part I'm just opposed to. We seem to be not modifying and reducing the regulations. We seem to be growing a new set of regulations. And I think if we have differences of opinion with the state on a definition, we should state that definition and leave it alone. Not, as we interpret, as we begin to try to explain these very difficult and complicated
Fine, let me ask
things.
you, would you be happy with, comfortable with, more comfortable with, the town of Reading accepts the current effective January 1, 2012 requirements, definitions, regulatory restrictions as specified by the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program of the Massachusetts Division of Fish and Wildlife under 310 CMR 10. All vernal pools currently listed as certified by Natural Heritage and those that meet the criteria as so defined are protected by Reading local regulations.
In short, no. I have a problem with the end of the sentence about or meet the requirements. I just don't think this board is currently qualified to go out and determine a vernal pool. And I'm concerned that an applicant who brings a vernal pool to us, for whatever reason, and some may, that I would want to make sure that they have gone through the proper guidelines and steps, they've filed the paperwork, and they've put it in front of the people who do certify vernal pools.
But why would they ever do that, Tom?
I don't know.
Well,
They would.
I don't.
Tom, I guess
Well, if someone's concerned about protecting their property, or someone's concerned about protecting these environments.
I
they
can
would.
imagine someone doing that. My question, Tom, is what do we do about the vernal pool that is discovered but is not filed?
I think that would be on the onus of whoever discovers it. If it's the board, then I think the board needs to file it and put that in front of Natural Heritage and say, are we correct in assessing this as a vernal pool?
Tom, did you call Natural Heritage and ask them what the process is that they do once they receive the paperwork for a
No.
vernal pool?
I read through their thing.
I've been through it down on the Cape.
Do they come out the site?
They can.
I think they're selective in the ones they do.
They're
look at.
selective. If somebody like Leo Kenny, well, I won't call a name, but if somebody that's obviously qualified fills it out, has pictures of the eggs, all that stuff, they probably wouldn't come at it. But if it's contentious or somebody objects to it, they could come at it. Even the ones that weren't contentious, it took months.
Okay, what we ought to do since.
And that's why I think the fact that the person went through those guidelines, which are very, very detailed,
And specific.
provided those pictures, provided those maps, provided all that information, and submitted it to them. We can't control what Natural Heritage does, but they did provide all the documentation necessary to get one certified. I think that one qualifies.
Okay.
But to say just because it's eligible
Okay,
is a little far-reaching
Right.
in
I'm
how many
gonna-
of these get certified.
right, I'm gonna take chairman's prerogative and go back to the regular agenda because we thought this would be quick and it obviously isn't, which is fine. We'll go back to vernal pools later. Let me, start with the first of the 720s, which is 20 Benjamin Lane, map 21, lot 1114, and it's RDA 12-2. Why don't you tell us what you're gonna do, Mr. Mall, or your contractor, or whoever?
Sure, I can start. We are putting an addition.
Mind introducing yourself?
I'm sorry. No, it's fine. I'm Mark Mall, obviously, one of the owners. My wife's here next to me, 20 Benjamin Lane. We are putting an addition straight over the garage.
Mhm.
No excavation, no new foundation work, going straight up. After consulting with all of you guys, I guess, at some level, we decided it was probably a good idea to come and get an RDA to make sure that we're following all the rules. So I think that's really why we're here tonight. I don't think we have anything out of the ordinary that's gonna cause any issues, but we just wanted to make sure that we are good citizens.
Okay. We did do a site visit, the plans were in the package, 3 of us were there. It is exactly as it was described. The resource area is protected by a fence and a row of trees, and there would be an additional silt fence of some sort or erosion control. There is no excavation. It's a 2-car garage currently with a peaked roof, and the assumption, they did provide us something that's rare for the Conservation Commission, which is a picture of what's going to happen. Essentially, it would be a peak of a slightly higher peak than the existing garage peak.
Well, almost a whole story higher, right?
Well,
Yeah, it's not because in the knee walls, I think it's like, we're only going up somewhere in the range
Right.
of 5 feet, so.
any questions from commission members?
There is no disruption of the ground or the soil or excavations.
No.
I mean, I think it's ripped the existing roof off.
I don't see why they're filing an RDA.
Well, I
Well-
think they're filing an RDA.
They're not subject to an RDA. They're
I-
not subject to the Wetlands Protection
I-
Act. There's no disturbance here.
I would agree with you, we can, however they have filed. And
Well, an
therefore-
RDA is actually written to ask that very question. And that's what we're doing here tonight.
Actually, I think an RDA is applicable even if you aren't disturbing the ground surface.
They have to file if they're in our jurisdiction, they can.
If they fill or alter, I believe is the wording.
No, here, I got the wording right here. There's several questions that it asks. First one, which is what Tom's talking about, is whether the area on the plan referenced below is subject to the jurisdictional Wetlands Protection Act. That's on there, so everyone inside our jurisdiction has to file. What most people ask is, are they in the buffer zone or the resource area? And is their project likely to alter the resource area as a result of their project? If the answer is a negative determination, and 3, the work, you're saying, yes, the work is in the resource area, but it will not alter the resource area. So this is what we're doing.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to see if there are other questions.
Well, I think under our new definition of minor project, this would be a minor project, but I think under the
Old
existing
definition.
definition, we're stuck with the RDA, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commission? Any questions from the public?
I have one.
You just asked about definition, I'm not arguing it. We're not disturbing.
No,
Are we
you're not
inside the
disturbing.
Are we inside the resource area?
I know, well, you're inside the buffer zone.
In the buffer, okay, that was
Yeah,
my only question.
the buffer zone essentially extends for structures to 35 feet from the resource areas.
Okay.
Okay, so you would be within the resource area.
100 feet.
Well, 100 feet, right, in the no structure zones.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission or the public?
I was, I don't know, we looked at it real quickly, but I don't know if you guys want to require some erosion control as a limit of work.
Well,
They
there's
had
that
suggested
vinyl fence,
Right.
and I think you're gonna put the hay bales just
within-
inside that.
Inside the vinyl
Okay.
fence, which is fine, and pretty much is what's shown on the
Okay,
stamp plan.
it just wasn't talked about because
Right.
I have it in
Yeah.
the determination.
Any other questions?
I really would make a motion that we issue a negative determination with no conditions at all. They're not excavating, they're not disturbing anything.
I think the only advantage of the erosion controls is if you get drift off the roof.
Well, they proposed the erosion controls, that wouldn't be a condition, that we would issue the negative determination as long as they comply with that. If they don't comply with that, and they put in a, 4,000-foot new addition, then that's not in compliance with those plans. But as long as it's comply with those plans, I think it's good.
Is there a second to Tom's motion with no conditions? You've got conditions in there, you have erosion control.
Yeah, I think a lot could happen. You could put a condition on to make sure the dumpster has a cover on it every night because they're so close. That's a condition that probably is applicable to this situation. I'm not saying that should be added,
Right.
but I'm just saying to have it come forward and talk about it is a good idea, no matter how simple the project is. On the back of the house, what kind of equipment is gonna go back there?
The only thing that would be back and in the surrounding areas would be workmen working off of ladders, staging to be able to do the siding, to be able to do that. Any disturbance of the soil would be, if the soil was wet and maybe muddy. The expected time for the project is probably gonna be, the framing would be about a week, and max with roof and everything else, 2 to 3 weeks. We'd hope to have it weather tight, so.
And when do you plan to start?
We would like to start approximately March 1st. That's what we're aiming for.
Tom, would you accept the friendly amendment of erosion controls?
Can I have one more question? What's your typical work hour?
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm Jun Yan, my
Okay.
neighbor.
Okay, very good, that's all. It's just for the record,
Yeah.
so we know.
What's your typical work hour during the day?
Normally, nobody will start before 7. Weekdays would be 7 to dusk. I think most towns control that.
Right.
From that, Saturdays would be, 7 to dusk again, probably. Sundays, work's not allowed in any town
Right.
that I'm aware of, so. If you have a problem, I'll give you.
I would, this is not the requirement, I'm just asking, can you start later than 7, like 9?
9 would not be a possibility, unfortunately. Most construction starts earlier than that and
Okay.
takes advantage of the daylight, so. Hopefully, we'll keep it as short-term as possible and
Okay.
minimize any interruption.
Any other questions from the public? Tom, will you accept the friendly amendment?
If it's okay with the applicant, I will, yeah, but I
Well,
really,
he put it on the plan.
yeah, I just,
We put it on the plan because we suggested that we did.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's really why we did it. We were just trying to do
Right.
the right thing.
Just
and
trying
that's
to do
why,
the right
you know,
thing.
We worked with you guys, so.
All right, do I have a second to Tom's motion
Second.
as amended?
Second.
The issue will be to issue a negative determination of applicability. You want us to vote no in this case. A no is a yes. All those in favor? Okay, great, you've got it.
Thank you.
We need to sign it, and then you can pick it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it took me fine. Just a question. Martin.
Good night, thank you.
Okay.
You can call me. Call me. And then, yeah, you mind have him call me. If there's a problem, call me. He's gonna take you.
did they come in front of the board, or
Who?
did they come in and ask for advice on what they should do?
They called me for advice.
And then we met with them on Sunday.
And it was suggested that they file an RDA.
Yeah.
We need to read the definition of alter in both the state regulations.
Have you read the presumption?
Town def
Have you
reduction.
read the presumption in the Wetlands Protection Act, Tom? Under RDA?
And,
That's where it starts.
yeah, I know.
It's
and
presumed that any work in the 100-foot buffer zone is going to alter the buffer zone.
No, it says will alter. an area subject to. And then the
Well,
definition of alter,
that's even more
the
definite.
definition of alter does not include adding, would you do an RDA for a roof?
Well, it's standard that you wouldn't do it for a roof, siding, or windows.
It goes back, Chuck.
I just don't know where we stop.
Did you go out to the site?
No, but they explained the site to me, they're adding a second story.
You gotta go and look at this site, it's pretty close to the wetlands.
I
And the
mean,
limit- you know-
I've always operated under the assumption, if there's any substantial activity within the buffer zone, it's within our jurisdiction. We can issue a negative determination on RDA, but it's within our jurisdiction.
That's what it's here for. Plus, the erosion control can be a limit of work.
Right.
And a stockpile area can go anywhere they want. So,
Okay.
But I mean, that's why a minor project, I think in this case, might be more appropriate, because they're not altering the ground surface. But that's in the future, that's not
so
under
I've
our
forgotten
current
the
definition.
minor project new definition.
I
What,
have
how would
to-
that be captured?
I thought we had in there if there was no,
I thought it was outside of 50 feet, things could happen.
I thought we had something in there about altering the ground surface, but that might not have made it.
I think we wrestled with that one, and I'm not sure exactly what got nailed in. And in fact, part of the issue is I still haven't finished the checklist, which is a key part of that. Okay, we will reopen the continued RDA 12-1, 7 Harvest Road, map 23, lot 3, in Guevara. We did do a site visit on Sunday. The property is along the stream bank. The house was built along that stream bank with a certain number of conditions and provisions. None of which, to my reading, unless I misread it, precluded further development at that site.
I would agree, I just, the special provision, which I was hoping would help us, doesn't really help us, it's just about the monuments.
Right.
I did not see the monuments out there, but I think I've seen them before.
They were, certainly we've seen them before.
We've seen them, are you familiar where those monuments are, those
Right on the
markers?
fence line.
They're
The
at,
stones on the ground,
Yeah.
yes,
right on the
They're on
fence
the
line.
fence.
The fence line you walk by,
yeah,
there's one right where the fence line starts. Right where the fence there, there's one with the street, and there's one down by the end of the other fence, where the fence ends.
and those markers are virtually the same distance from the stream as the
Yes.
fence is.
Yep, they're lined up right.
So this addition then would come right up to those markers.
Well, I mean, I think the question really is,
It wouldn't be up where the markers are, it'd be the same space between the markers now where the house is now.
Right.
Because the markers where the fence is, and then you have that, 6, 7 feet between the fence and the house. So the house would be aligned, it's actually a little shorter on that side.
Oh,
Closer.
so the addition won't come all the way to the fence,
No.
it's just gonna be
No,
parallel with the
way you
existing?
drew it, it's
Okay,
actually,
right.
when you go down to the end of the house, it's gonna come in a foot from the house,
Right.
from the house.
right, and the interesting question is that still doesn't quite, according to the plan you saw, make the 25-foot. However, that's an RDA, not an NOI. In other words,
Yeah.
we were presented with a schedule for the RDA, and the question really is, what would we issue an RDA, and what, and if we do, what would it be, a positive or a negative determination? And if there are conditions, what would they be? So,
Well, in condition 3A on page 18 of this top of this attachment to the order of conditions, it does say that zone of natural protection needs to be protected in perpetuity.
Right, and he's not encroaching on that, was what my question was.
That would be fine, except if something were to happen there, we would need a very detailed plan on how they plan on getting there.
absolutely, and there are some real challenges of how one gets to that piece of property, okay? And there are also, the current regulations would, as I interpret them, would prevent anything from being built closer than 25 feet from the resource area.
Oh, well, isn't it 35?
Well, it's a very interesting question as to whether you use the state regs or our local reg.
I think our local reg includes both a 35 and a 25.
Our local reg says the ZNV is 25 and structure is 35.
Correct.
And this would, as the house would be, this would be within the 35,
That's
but not
right.
within the 25.
That's right. So,
And do we know, I following up on your other question, Tom, do we know if the construction could be accomplished without bringing vehicles within that 25 feet?
I think
Well-
I think it could. I think it would be extremely difficult, but that would be for them to show us that it can happen that way.
My brother talked about that, because there's no base slab.
Right.
So manual shoveling and, guys like that, you don't need big trucks to come in. It's only going out 10 feet.
But you would probably have to excavate some of that material, even if it's slab on grade, would be my guess. Wouldn't you think so,
There would have to
Tom?
be footage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
There would
yeah.
have to be footage.
They'd have to bring in materials. The back of the yard's open though.
That's what I can't remember. I wasn't looking at that
Well,
when we
the-
were right there.
The
From the
street,
other side of the street,
yeah,
that's all wide open.
you could get from that street in.
If you allowed us to go through there, we could, yeah, no problem.
There'd be an awful lot of tree cutting,
There is
Is there a lot of trees out there?
Right.
which
Where,
would be
where,
all being
where,
I don't
where
know
are they
back.
talking
If you're
about?
talking about from Track Road, if you look at 7, Track
Yeah.
Road goes across and there is a huge amount of tree cover. So you couldn't do that without, if you brought equipment in, you'd have to remove large numbers of trees.
So you couldn't get back there with even a backhoe
No, I don't think
unless you drove through that 25-foot
ZNV,
ZNV that I can see.
right. I mean,
Unless you came through 33, that's Track Road, or 39, or 43.
I mean, I think Tom's point is well taken, and that is, if there were to be, whatever decision we take, if we decide to issue a determination in a positive sense, they would have to file an NOI, and they would have to give us a construction sequence, which would give us comfort that they could do that construction without jeopardizing the 25-foot area.
well. They first need to overcome the 35-foot setback.
Well, that,
They need a variance from the 35-foot
Yeah.
they
setback.
either need a variance or, they have a very long, very narrow, Lego block. Since the lot's only 50 feet wide, am I right?
I'm not exactly sure how
But I
wide.
think it's 50, I think that's.
I don't see how we could do this as an RDA.
No, I don't.
No,
And, I think we
Tom, I
should.
think we'd have to issue a determination one way or another.
Yeah.
And we would not, you can't approve this as an RDA.
I agree. That's what I just said. So I think I think we need to vote. In fact, I'll make a motion that we vote as a positive that this cannot be done as an RDA.
I second.
And I need the form in front of me to pick which one of the categories. But I definitely think this project needs to go through a notice of intent and really pay attention to the regulations and to make sure it can happen.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from the public? Yep.
Paul McDonald,
Yep.
39 Line.
I'm sorry,
Paul
which,
McDonald, 39 Line Road.
Yes.
okay, right there, all right.
I would pose the same question to myself as to how they would get materials to even build this thing without impacting the rest of that lot that is tree covered
Right,
and
And-
creates a habitat.
right. What we'll do tonight is to likely, since we have a motion on the floor to issue what's called a positive determination. And as you just heard from the last case, what most people want us is to say a negative determination. Positive determination would mean they would have to they would have to go to the next step, which is to file a notice of intent. As part of the notice of intent, we would likely ask for a very detailed construction sequence and for the plans to adhere to the setbacks from the wetlands issue. They would need from us a variance if they are to be closer than 35 feet
With the structure.
with the structure to the wetlands. Now, we can issue such a variance. I'm not saying we would, but we can issue a variance. You know, we might ask for mitigation. Basically, what we did when the house was built was to ask for substantial mitigation along the stream bank and plantings between the house and the stream bank. They are likely, and again, I don't pretend to be a zoning guy, I'm not, but they are very likely if the proposal that we saw last week, we don't consider that a plan, it was a proposal, is to be executed, they would likely need a variance from planning and zoning, because they are not meeting these sideline setbacks as well. Okay? Do you have any other questions?
I don't have any other questions, no, but as stewards of the conservation of our land here in the town, you know, it just seems as though everything can be worked around with variances, the 10-foot
No,
side back,
no, what-
that'll be 7.5, the
what-
100-foot turns into 35.
Now, let me be very clear, okay? Our decision tonight is one of two decisions. We either vote a positive determination, because we have what's called a request for determination in front of us, or a negative one. On the last case, we voted a negative determination because we thought there would be no impact, okay? On this one, we are likely, because that's the motion on the floor, to vote a positive determination. That doesn't mean they can do anything. It means they have to file the next set of documents, and they have to meet the guidelines to the best of their ability within those documents. And there would then be another hearing on what's called a notice of intent. A notice of intent says, we're taking it to the next step, we wish to do this. They have to have a complete set of plans. In this case, we would be very concerned about the construction schedule, construction detail, because in some cases, not talk about this example, but if you were to basically put up a deck on the back of a house, it's conceivable that you could go out there with a post hole digger and dig appropriate depth footings, pour sonotubes full of concrete, and build a deck, okay? So it's possible to do some construction without jeopardizing. I'm not trying to make the case that it is or isn't in this one. All I'm saying is what we would be doing tonight would be to ask that if the applicant wishes to pursue the project, they would have to file the next series of papers, including a much more detailed plot plan, construction sequence, and so on.
Yeah, I know.
And there's no guarantee, by the way, and I say that without, I'm not trying to prejudice it one way or the other. There's no guarantee that if they file a notice of intent, that we would approve it. Now, our catch-22, if you will, is that we can't act on some future notice of intent and say we can't actually say you can't do this on this one. What we can say is you have to file the next set of documents and meet the restrictions on that property to the best of your ability. Okay?
I understand.
Yeah, and I wanted to clarify that, not for any other reason than to be clear about what we can and cannot do tonight. Are there any other questions from the commission?
I just wanted to add,
Yeah.
having said that, and that's absolutely accurate, just as a courtesy to the applicant, we are discussing it in an open forum and see what some of the challenges are and discuss without reaching conclusion what the likelihood of meeting those challenges or what the difficulty would be in meeting those challenges. So the applicant has a feel for what they're up against, if you will.
And it's, Jamie said it very, very well, it's not an attempt to prejudice the decision, but it's very different if you, as you saw in the first case, where you can say, we don't think there's any impact, not a problem, and in this case where we've raised a number of concerns. Okay, are there any other questions?
I guess I would just add for Tom's benefit, I think our conclusion from the site visit was that bank stabilization and plantings adjacent to the house was very successful. The bank seems stable, the vegetation is, there's mature vegetation out there, it's well rooted. On the negative side though, if you go just downstream from that improved bank at where the abandoned bridge exists, there's erosion behind the bulkhead, the embankment for the bridge.
Yeah, I think the town is gonna have some problems with those bridges at some point.
That's why they close them.
Well, they certainly closed them for that reason, but closed or open,
They should be either
They-
constructed to modern requirements or taken out,
Yeah,
is what
I mean,
should
it-
happen.
one of those things. Tom, any other questions?
Nope.
Hearing none, I'll ask for vote. All those in favor of a positive determination?
Did
Okay,
you wanna say, number 3 or 4?
Can we
Or
check
you-
more than one of these, or is it?
You can check as many as you think is appropriate.
I would recommend that one.
Could you read them, Tom?
One is the area described on the reference plans is an area subject to protection under the Act. Removing, filling, dredging, or altering of the area requires the filing of a notice of intent.
okay.
2B is the boundaries of resource areas listed below are not confirmed by this determination, regardless of whether such boundaries are contained on the plans attached to this determination or to the request for determination. 3 would be work described on the reference plans and documents is within an area subject to protection under the Act and will remove, fill, dredge, or alter that area. Therefore, said work requires the filing of a notice of intent.
Let's go with 1 and 3. The other one is not quite as clear. 1 and 3 are very, very clear.
And there's also 6 that says the following area and a work, if any, is subject to a municipal ordinance or bylaw, but not subject to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection.
Well,
that's
that
interesting.
would not,
So 1 and 3, let's
1
check
and
1 and 3.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, fine. We essentially have issued a
I
positive.
understand.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
I figured you did.
One more question I gotta ask you. Now, am I allowed to put a fence in the rest of that property? Because if someone falls and hurts themselves on that property, it's my responsibility. Kids run back there and get hurt, they gonna sue me. So
Right.
can I fence in, not the borderline, down the side of the house and down where the street is?
If you show us on a map, then we can.
I think, did my brother email you the drawing of the Chuck?
I didn't
The fence?
receive anything today, but I have an old drawing.
Are you talking about a chain link fence similar to what you have now?
Whatever fence you allow me to put up there. Because if people run into that piece of property, it's my responsibility. They're gonna, if someone gets hurt on there, they're gonna sue me. So while we're doing all this, we were thinking about doing it for a while. Since I have you
Do
people
you-
here, I mean,
I think the short answer is if you're gonna disturb the soil or erect structures within that buffer zone, you would need to talk to Chuck about the appropriate
what kind of
filing.
fence?
No, the appropriate filing that we would need to
Right.
see.
I
It
mean,
it might be a
well,
minor
I mean,
project,
yeah.
it could be an RDA, it depends on the fence, the
Yeah.
type, the size,
I asked Chuck
location.
earlier, he said
Just-
bring it up tonight.
Just a quick look at the plan. I don't know, Tom, do you have a 22-9 between,
I do.
yeah, so it's like 50 feet away where he's talking about.
50 feet from the resource area?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's talking
Well,
about.
it's 'cause if someone runs back there and they fall and hurt, they're gonna sue
You have it,
me.
Tom?
It's gonna be along
You got
the side of the
An
house where the
as-built
street
here.
is. They enclose that piece of property so no one can go back there. I know I can't touch it, but if someone does fall on
That,
that,
that would look like a minor project to me.
If it's 50 feet, yeah, I would.
Where is it going?
I'm going.
I think it's going along the property line,
yeah.
or inside the property line.
The,
Along the property line,
which property
Fence
line?
line all the
That's
way
what I
out.
just asked him. I think it's on-
This
The riverside or the
Where the
backside?
houses are, the back street is. I would not put it,
Yeah, you can't put it on the.
no, I wouldn't put it on the riverside because no one can get in that way anyways.
Did you guys all see that? He's
Yeah,
gonna bring
I
it down
think
this
would be
side
a-
and across the
A minor
back.
project.
Yeah.
So do I have to file a new form or?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very brief form, you don't need a hearing.
You could just draw it, you could take that plan and just put a colored line
He
on
was
it.
supposed to send one early, he must have got busy tied up with other meetings or something.
Okay.
Alright, so we'll just file a new form for that.
Yep.
This we were just talking about and we were back there thinking, you know, it's easy, anybody can get on there from either side of the street. You know, if someone does get hurt, it's my responsibility to fix that, so.
Yeah.
So probably won't be a problem, just to fence it in, no problem. Good job, Chuck.
No, it's in our regs. It's a minor project and it's something that just discussed and everyone agrees.
Okay.
What we will do is, sign off the draft. Chuck has not drafted an RDA, right?
I have not.
Okay, we'll draft that and let you know when it's approved.
All right,
Okay?
I appreciate it. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you very much.
Do stay in touch though, because the town is looking at that bridge
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what they want to do with it. So I'm sure you'll be notified, but just be aware that the DPW is doing
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I mean, like, for us, you know, it's either way, it doesn't affect us, you know. When we have a baby and we like something fixed soon, so, you know, when he starts going out there, we don't run off into that, that's all. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Thanks very
following
much for
the
members
comment.
of the public coming.
It's our pleasure.
Well, it's actually an important issue because all too often people don't show up. And the difficulty really is if you don't show up and something is done, you don't have any input, we don't have any input, so.
Correct.
Thank you.
I know I spent 3 years at these meetings before the house was built. 3 solid years.
I remember.
And
I used to have brown hair then. No.
Well, I never saw the site. I never saw the site before the house was built. Was there a smaller house there that was torn down? It was vacant
Yeah, the difficulty was because
of the zoning setback.
well, there was a lawsuit
Yeah.
to enable the owner of 2 lots to combine them and permit one house to be built. So it was a challenge to start out with. It was a challenging challenge. Thanks.
Conservation had kiboshed the whole thing.
Yeah,
And they appealed that and went into the state and something happened and all
well,
of a sudden I
what
was
ended
at
up
a
happening,
meeting.
what ended up happening is a decision was made, I think in the courts actually, to say that we could not prevent a single-family house because the lots predate 1996.
Right.
And there is a kind of grandfather clause about those things. So I can remember sweating through what could we permit and what could we not permit,
Yeah.
which is why it's a house built the way it's built. Thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I just have one more thing?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Will we be apprised of any further?
Yes, if
things?
there's a notice of intent, you as a butters have to be noticed. Is that right, Chuck? Yes.
Yeah.
And
But
that-
if it's a minor project and he just puts up a fence, you will not be notified.
That's, yeah, I understand
The
that.
fence would not require notification, but any construction would require a filing of notice of intent. And part of the process of a notice of intent is another notice to abutters.
Now, did you receive a notice for this RDA or request for determination? Were you notified?
2 weeks ago when we first started the
Yeah.
process, yes, I was notified of
And you'll be
Just out of
notified.
curiosity, was that certified mail?
that. Yes,
It was, okay.
Fine. Thanks.
yes it was.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to Vernal Pools.
for clarification, sir.
Yes.
The, numbers for the Endangered Species Act is 310 CMR 10.02, parentheses 1.
Endangered species or
Oh, I'm
national
sorry.
heritage?
Vernal pools,
Vernal pools, good.
310 CMR.
10.02, parentheses 1, part 1.
Okay.
That's the Wetlands Protection Act, right?
Mhm. But that is their definition of vernal pool habitat.
All right. So let's go back to where we were, if I can pick up the discussion. So fundamentally, Tom, you would be comfortable with, if I interpret your last comments, the second paragraph, not the first paragraph on my draft.
I'm sorry, let me,
That's all right.
the first paragraph?
What I'm hearing you say, unless I misunderstand, is you would, if you were to edit this, you would take out the first paragraph entirely. And you would also take out the words those that meet the criteria.
I would insert new words, similar to the words I proposed, that would qualify what, meet the criteria means. And I think that by requiring someone to submit and go through the analysis and provide the pictures, locate everything they're supposed to locate, document it, that, in my opinion, would meet the criteria. And I think we need to tell them that, so that we don't have to interpret this later on, that someone says, well, you know, I was there and I saw all these things, and
Okay, fine,
therefore it
fine.
meets the criteria.
Just the cynic in me thinks that someone who wanted the vernal pool, I don't know why they would, or at least wanted to overcome this hurdle, would do all that even though they didn't have a real vernal pool. And then they would meet that qualification.
Well,
Right, but you're right, nobody would want to do that. The opposite
But they could.
is the concern. When do we, under what situations do we require them to go through that process?
You know, the only thing I've ever heard is that you have the state definition from natural heritage, and then the town tags along the part that if it's not certified. So what they do is they want to add more protection. That's all we have the right to do with our bylaw and our
Right, you
regulations.
can't take
So
away protection.
it's certified, that's great. But if it's not certified, the towns want to protect that area. So they're saying
Right.
uncertified pools get the same protection.
Right. So, but I think what we're struggling with, what constitutes an uncertified vernal pool?
Yeah, and Tom is basically saying unless it's filed, it doesn't qualify.
But
either
the-
already accepted or filed.
Right.
Okay, but
Already accepted,
if
there's no
we,
argument.
if we can on the applicant to file, and that would limit what they're proposing to do, they would not file. They
I-
just say, sorry, I'm not filing.
I would completely agree, but obviously someone's filing here in Reading. We have the most in the state, so somehow it's working. I don't know.
Yeah, but it wasn't the property owners that filed.
It doesn't
We
have
don't
to
need to
be.
worry about those ones. We need to worry about the ones that weren't discovered yet.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I-
Right. So let's just say, for example, I have a hole in my backyard, and it has some water in it. But I'm up on a hill, and I want to put in a garage within 25 feet of that hole. How do we, and it's not on the list. What do we do? Under the proposal that Bill and Barbara put together, the Conservation Commission or their agent would go out there and say, that's just a hole you dug, and you filled up with water so your kids could splash around it. It's not a vernal pool, and that would be that. As I understand it, under Tom's proposal, we would have to, the Conservation Commission would have to tell me, you need to file with National Heritage Program to get that certified as a vernal pool. And I said, I don't want it as a vernal pool, I'm not gonna file.
No.
And we'd be at loggerheads.
No. In order to get it certified, they would have to file. I wouldn't require them to file every hole and determine if it is. But if it is filed and it follows the guidelines, then we would accept it as a vernal pool.
But how would we determine?
We would find eggs, we would find the
No,
characteristics
no,
of a
but
vernal
under your
pool, we-
definition, what would we do in that case? Would we call it a vernal pool or not call it a vernal pool?
If we had questions about it, I would think that we would go hire a professional wetland scientist and say, what is this?
But under your, or under Barbara, or Bill's and Barbara's proposal, Conservation Commission could go out and look and say, that is obviously not a vernal pool, and that's it, it's not eligible.
I'm not saying disqualification, I'm saying qualification. And I think you're saying that we would force them to file. Never. But I might, if there were a question about it, we might, again, have the applicant pay for a professional to come in here and have that professional tell us, is it or isn't it? And if they feel it is, file the paperwork and send it in.
Well, but Tom,
But if we're not questioning that, and I don't think we would,
I don't.
Well, without the filing, how would we do it? Would we just walk up to it and say, yeah, it looks like one, okay, let's go?
But, Tom, my question.
That's the part I'm kind of
Well,
fuzzy about.
I'm
here.
struggling now with what you just said, okay? Because I don't see in what you've said that it empowers us to say to somebody, we're concerned that that's a vernal pool, go out and prove it isn't, or go out and have it evaluated.
Well, we have that right in any of these determinations. If we find a delineation that's wrong, we can do that.
Well, the applicant can withdraw at any point and just go to DEP and get a superseding order.
Sure, they certainly can.
Well, no, they can't, because this is the bylaws. It's not the state program. They can,
Regulations.
DEP
It's the
can,
regulations.
Not
but
bylaws.
DEP cannot issue a superseding order over our bylaws.
Well,
Yeah,
that's right, but
This is not a
they'll get,
bylaw, this is a regulation.
Well,
They can
it's
do
a
that.
regulation under our bylaw. DEP has nothing to do with this.
I don't know.
no, you're right. I mean, he'd only get half the carrot. And he has to go to Superior Court or whatever court to go after our bylaw and regulations. This person does. But that's the alternative.
Well, let me go to the other extreme. Rather than my lot up on the hill, we're on Strawberry Lane. That vernal pool, you're familiar with that vernal pool. And right now, it's not certified.
It's been decertified.
It's been decertified. But let's say we feel that it's eligible. We as a group feel it's eligible. We've been out there, we've looked at it before, we've seen the eggs, we've seen all this.
So,
We
can I ask you
feel
a
it's
question?
eligible, but it's
How-
not listed.
How did you feel it was eligible? What did you see?
We said the whole business, fairy shrimp, the eggs, Fran went out there with the whole kit and caboodle.
It turns out to be a really quirky one, because that was decertified.
It was decertified because.
But they didn't use their process for decertification.
But
Right,
one
but
like
now-
that,
okay.
it's not certified, but we have all looked at it and we feel based on our knowledge, experience, expertise, what there is of it, that it is. And we say, okay, that's a vernal pool, it's eligible to be a vernal pool, even though it's not listed, therefore it is subject to the restrictions associated with a vernal pool. The applicant can say, we disagree with you, and they can hire an expert under Bill's proposed rule. They can hire an expert, go through that checklist, and convince us it does not meet the eligibility requirements.
Well, they've just convinced Natural Heritage that it's not. How can we say it is? I mean, or the
Well,
board said it was. I mean,
No, but
Well, let's take
You know,
another
if
one,
he-
not that one, but one like that.
well, in this, wherever it is, same scenario. I mean, Natural Heritage says it's not a vernal pool.
yeah,
But let's say they
This one's kind
don't.
of complicated because Natural Heritage didn't follow their rubric.
Yeah.
It's a classic case in which, they say, here's what we're gonna do to decertify, didn't do any of that. They simply accepted the
But
decertification.
they ultimately decertified. So
They
it's
did.
decertified. It is not a vernal pool.
Right
It's
now.
not a vernal pool under the state program, but it's questionable whether or not it is under our bylaws. I don't know the
No,
answer to
I
that
think when it's
question.
decertified, it's decertified, period. And I think.
Our
the-
bylaws, or our regulations as written don't say that, though. It lists all these things that a vernal pool is supposed to be. It's very confusing.
Right.
That's what
And
we're trying to straighten
fine,
out.
That's what we're trying to straighten out.
Right, and I think the way it's written now in the proposal that we were given, doesn't list all of those things, but it certainly allows us to apply almost whatever we want, because the criteria isn't defined.
Well, the criteria are those
Listed in the
certification process.
natural heritage process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I don't understand, Tom, is we say we accept the current requirements, definitions, regulatory restrictions, and all vernal pools that are currently listed as certified, and those that meet the criteria, same paragraph, same criteria, are so defined, are protected by the writing.
Yeah, I just don't know who's gonna make that determination that they
Well,
meet the criteria.
we could put in there.
That's why
I think we could put in there, if there is a discrepancy or dispute between the commission and the applicant as to eligibility, it will be submitted to National Heritage Program for their determination. How's that
According-
sound?
Well,
Excuse me.
what I'm saying is, as a board, as you know, the body that's supposed to be protecting these areas, if we actually feel that it meets the criteria, why wouldn't we want it filed and get it certified, so that there is no question, so that it protects the resource around it?
The reason I don't want to is because I don't want to be in the position of going on somebody's private property and filing for certification on something their property when they don't want it certified.
Well, again, but we will determine that it is and still hold them to the same threshold.
Yes.
See, that's the same effect. You're taking their rights away without a determination.
Well, no, then the onus is on them to, come back and say, I've hired someone. They're coming here with a project. If it's a small homeowner, these things are tough. But if it's someone putting a house in, they're gonna make some money on the house. They can handle these kind of situations where they need to hire an expert. Usually the guy that delineates the wetland can certify the vernal pools also. If it,
Determine their eligibility, not
You
actually
can't
certify.
certify.
so, the plans come in with potential vernal pool on it. And the bylaw gives the commission the right to, give it the 100-foot buffer zone.
The vernal pool is the buffer, the 100-foot distance is actually part of the vernal pool. The vernal pool doesn't have a buffer.
Right.
What?
The vernal
The
pool's a little
100
bit
foot
different
is
than a
part of the
bordering
vernal
vegetated
Says the
wetland.
vernal pool and the 100-foot zone around a vernal pool
Right, it's subject to protection.
is the vernal pool.
So that the vernal
habitat.
pool is
It's
the
protected by
ground
the state.
around the pool?
That's
Vernal pool
included.
Vernal
and
pool.
the 100-foot is considered the vernal pool.
Well, it's
It's the
under,
habitat.
it's under,
That'd be
it's
considered the
resource.
habitat.
It's
Right.
resource
There's
area.
I'm not
no
sure
buffer
about-
to that.
Says vernal pool habitat,
Yeah.
Right.
the vernal pool and a 100-foot zone around the
I mean,
vernal pool.
Is
So that means
subject
the pool
to,
and then
is-
100 feet
that
beyond.
is the jurisdictional
That's-
area. Buffer zone is not jurisdictional area.
Right. And
It's
not,
buffer
and it's
zone.
not added to that.
And I think we're comfortable that, we want to retain that. I haven't heard anybody say we want to change that.
Oh, no.
No, that's in the state regs.
Well, the only thing that, I guess the question is,
What I'd be proposing is that we write a definition and that we have clear definition here, that it's, first we steal the definition from the Wetlands Protection Act, and then we add to it what we think is important. And what we think is important is this certification, and the decision here, the discussion is about meeting criteria, eligibility, potential. How is that determined? How does someone either meet or not meet that criteria? That's the whole discussion. I don't think we need a section on vernal pools. There's quite a detailed section on vernal pools in the
And-
Wetlands Protection Act. I don't think we disagree with anything in that. The part that we want is that we want to be able to, when we see one and we feel it is one, to be able to label it that way and have, have it meet some criteria and say, we think that is, and unless you disagree, it's.
well, then it sounds to me, and I could be wrong, that there's a missing expansion of what you had drafted.
According to Natural Heritage, Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, the whole bit, says, the NHESP administers the official vernal pool certification program and accepts certain biological and physical documentation. People interested in, I skipped all the people that are involved, which is basically anybody. People interested in vernal pool certification should, one, download the guidelines, fill out the form, and it says NHESP does not field visit pools prior to certification, but relies on the submittal of accurate information and clear documentation of both the biological and physical evidence. If the documentation is inconclusive, additional documentation may be requested, or the pool may not be certified.
Right.
and it's right in there.
Right.
Right, and they definitely don't always come in and look at it.
That's right.
They usually don't, but I have been involved in the case where they did.
Sure.
They retain
They
that.
can if they want, but they
Right.
don't necessarily have
Exactly.
to. If they believe what's in the file,
Right.
fine. If somebody wants to dispute it, they have every right to do that.
I mean, for example, in one of them we were involved with, they asked for the credentials of the person that filled out the form.
Jamie, I was talking to a consultant today for the Forest Street project, and she said that she found that the regulations here in Reading are difficult, in her opinion, because they aren't very standard with other towns. There's always some sort of, left turn or loophole or something like that that she needs to, be brought up to speed on. And I was wondering if you got that in your ad hoc committee.
Yes,
And then
we
I
did.
also want to add
It was
that I
not,
think,
not exactly, but that same concept, yes.
I think if we don't standardize this to what other towns have done and at least look at other towns, because I've never heard what Tom is suggesting before. And I'd like to see it, if it's in other towns, it'd be fine.
One
but-
way.
Let him
Ashburnham.
finish. Let him finish for once. Don't keep interrupting.
Don't tell me what to do.
No, that's my job, Tom. Let him finish, okay? Tom, you're out of order.
I'm only saying that I need to have, I would like to
She's out of order
see
too.
a more standard
She's out of order.
regulations with other towns. So when someone looks through it, they're expecting these things. It's the unexpected that causes the problem. And I'm expecting to know that my vernal pools, if I'm working in another town, whether it's certified or not, if it meets the criteria, I might as well draw a 100-foot circle around it. So that's my input from someone talking to me today.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. I think that the only thing that would add to it, our intent from the ad hoc committee was more to make it consistent with the state rather than other towns. But that consistency was a common and persistent comment we got, and one thing we're trying to achieve is the consistency. But again, more with the state rather than other towns.
Well, it sounds as if this question of the draft on the table doesn't meet Tom's muster. The concern I have about Tom's draft is I don't believe it explicitly says, and I think it should, that we have the responsibility to ask for a filing, a determination about the nature of a suspected vernal pool. And I think we need to add that.
That we have that on all of these documents, though it's language in the state, language in the local regulation that says that we can ask for additional information when requested. It's just a blanket. If we need more information to make a determination, we can ask for it. Simple as that. It doesn't need to be specifically stated in every single document, every single item, every single thing.
I think you're talking about two different things. I agree with you, you're absolutely right. But what I think Bill is saying is that if we limit the protection only of certified vernal pools, then we miss pools that have never been certified.
Well, I completely agree with Chuck, and he was in the middle of his statement asking me if I had found other references, and I have. In fact, one of them just before I came here, Ashburnham, has almost identical language that says they'll follow the identification, the definition of the Wetlands Protection Act, and they must be certified. That's it.
Okay, but that's Ashburnham.
Yeah, right. So
No,
I would suggest that maybe we go research some other towns, local, same character as Reading, stuff like that, and we find out what are they doing that people are understanding and being able to interpret easily. And I think we'll find it's pretty clearly defined. It isn't a little bit of, well, and if we think it might, then it is. And that's what I see as some of the problem with the Reading regulation, is it just kind of leaves it out there as, you know, if we think it might be, then it might be.
I would say Ashburnham is a good community, but it's unlike Reading. But when it said it must be certified, was that before they got an RDA or whatever the filing
Well,
was
it says it
for,
must
or
be
was it?
certified.
It's gotta be before.
It's gotta be
Yeah.
before. What?
No, it could mean, you could mean, and now that we've decided that the board thinks it's a vernal pool, go and get it certified after we finish up our meeting.
Well, I'm using certified in the terms that it's certified by the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program.
Right, and you go to their website and you go to their map and it's on there.
Right. So that
And
would be before.
And I applaud that town, but I disagree with them in Reading. I think that I want to protect pools that are not on that list, but meet the eligibility requirements to be on a list, even if they aren't on the list. I want to protect those under the bylaws.
Right.
And I think that's true because the board is supposed to protect wildlife habitat. And we're doing that, but we need to protect it, with our expertise, which is, in the spring, fairy shrimp, salamanders, we see it, we're gonna call it as a vernal pool. We're gonna give it all the protection we can, and then it's up to the applicant to prove us wrong. If he wants to. I don't think, I wouldn't object if I saw that stuff. I would say, I guess you're right. No fish population.
And I'm good with that.
Now, if it was something in the middle of the summer and they wanted to have an expert, that is where I agree. I mean, it becomes very simple at a certain time of the year.
And very challenging at most of the rest of it.
Exactly.
Right.
I would be willing to compromise on the fact that we remove the first paragraph on this one here, vernal pools. We insert a paragraph in the front that says it shall be defined as in 310 CMR 10 and the following, and then a similar sentence to the second paragraph. I'm not sure that the effective date is necessary because we will end up passing this regulation sometime in the future with a look-back date of January 1st.
My concern for the date, Tom, is simply that gives us a marker that says if the regulations change from that date, we ought to go back and look at it. I don't anticipate they're gonna change, but the state has done interesting things in the past. And what I don't wanna do is essentially say, no matter what the state changes in the vernal pool definition, we go with it. I'm simply saying we're happy with the regulations as of this date. Now,
Okay, I see it as just extra words that are just kind of not necessary, but they can stay. The regulation's filled with enough words that aren't necessary, so a few more won't hurt.
so I'm still a little confused as to exactly where we are. Could you repeat what you said, since I wasn't able to take notes as quickly as you spoke?
I think the second paragraph needs some work.
Okay.
Because it's as specified by the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program or by the
No,
Massachusetts
it should be
Division.
of the Massachusetts Division of Fish and Wildlife, under 310 CMR 10.0.
Okay, and that needs to be verified, because again, I have not
Yeah,
read through
I will go verify.
310 CMR 10.
Now, are you still uncomfortable with that meets criteria as so defined?
Nope, as long as the upper paragraph is replaced with the first part being vernal pools shall be defined as 310 CMR 10.0, and the following, which would be the second paragraph.
Okay, so essentially, if I get you correctly, what it would read is vernal pool shall be defined as 310 CMR -10, we'll have to verify that, and the following, and then it says the town of Reading accepts the current effective requirements, definitions, regulatory restrictions as specified by Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program of the Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife, 310 CMR 10, all vernal pools currently listed as certified, and those that meet the criteria are as so defined are protected by the Reading local regulation. Comfortable?
Yep, and you see it all written out. And
There's
I believe the section in 310 CMR is 10.04 definitions
Yep,
on page 13 of the regs.
04. Okay, can I snag that one, Barbara?
yep.
Okay. Let me redraft that and see if I can get it to the point where I haven't screwed it up again. Okay. You want to move on to wildlife habitat?
Sure.
Why not?
Oh, before we do that, Jamie, you're not gonna be here in 2 weeks?
I will not be here.
Okay. I am literally getting off an airplane the preceding night from Europe. I will be toast. I am not gonna come because I'm not sure I can even intelligently gavel. So I would assume that we need to do a quorum check for that meeting, if Jamie and I can't be here, and somebody else has to chair it.
Okay, and we have the Forest Ave site coming in.
Pardon me?
Forest Street?
Forest
Oh,
Street.
man.
Yeah, but I there's no sense my trying to run a meeting when in fact I'm,
Which one is Forest?
We
those two
issued,
houses,
we issued a wetlands boundary, what do you call it,
an
a,
RDA.
no,
No,
what,
determination of applicability.
no, it was.
ANRAD.
ANRAD.
Forest Street was the
Oh,
one
for the
with
houses.
the three houses on the two pieces
On the
of
sub, on the
property
new subdivision, that's
with
big.
the ticks,
Yes,
the tick location.
yep.
What a way to
It's
remember
5
the
houses
property.
now.
Ones with the ticks.
It's
4 of them
houses
are in
now.
the buffer zones. There's work just outside of the
They're
35
putting
feet.
5 houses in there?
Yeah.
It's not much more than an acre, is it?
No, it's 3 acres.
There's a stormwater detention basin. There's
It's
a lot of
it's
stuff happening.
It's a 3 acre property.
Yeah,
Because it
but-
was 1.6 or 7 for one site, and in fact, I think it's 3.1. Because remember when we looked back, there's a great deal of wooded upland.
That we never really
We
paid
never
much.
really traipsed
that
into
much.
that because it's not part of the jurisdiction.
Are you guys willing to make comments if you got the, is that needed? Do you need to feel necessary to do that?
I mean, if the people that are here are comfortable and pass it, fine. If the people that are here want it continued for whatever reason, then
It will be.
it's open season for me and Bill to go at them again.
Yeah, I don't.
If we're at the continuation.
I understand some people like to make comments, but that's
I'm-
fine.
Do
I'm
we
gonna-
know when we'll get it? I mean, how?
I have the submittal in
NOI.
my office. So,
Okay, the chances of my seeing that are just about zero because I'm leaving in the middle of next week to go away for.
Yeah, I'm leaving on Friday morning, so I won't even get the package.
yeah, the distribution is always the Thursday before
Yeah.
the upcoming meeting.
I got my package Saturday this week, oddly enough. I don't know why, I
Yeah.
guess the mailman lost it.
Well, it's funny. Mine came Friday, and mine 3 or 4 a month ago was the one who got there on Saturday because I asked him
Right,
whether it had arrived, and everybody said, "Oh yeah, it's here." So maybe they're varying
I'll
the.
try to move up distribution one day. Maybe that'll work.
Okay, wildlife habitat.
I had a tough time with this one because in the state regulation, it says that wildlife habitat has got a definition in Mass General Law 131, Section 40, Paragraph 14. I think Paragraph 14 in that Mass General Law is actually a definition of a river. So I cannot find a wildlife habitat in that regulation. I think wildlife habitat was added back in mid-70s or 80s.
No,
The fact that it was protected.
Wetlands Protection Act was passed in the mid-70s. The Riverfront Protection Act was mid-80s.
Yeah.
Wildlife might have been added in the early 80s. case as conceivable.
Yeah, so I'm not, I don't have a, quote, state definition in, that available to me. There's a lot of, discussion in the addendum here, the preface to, wetlands regs and relative, to, you know, different, rulings and, discussion, but it's not actual regulation. So, I don't know, I don't know if anyone else has been able to find a definition of wildlife habitat that we could compare this to.
Natural heritage doesn't.
Or is there a recommendation to accept something different too? I don't even know that we have, you know, did the committee look at this and say there's a great definition here?
I thought we looked at the state program and found a good definition, but I could be misremembering. But I'll tell you the problem. If you look at this number 1, persons proposing to alter natural wetland areas suitable for wildlife habitat. Actually, any natural wetland area is wildlife habitat.
Right.
And then it says, shall be required to submit documentation describing the alternatives to alteration and to provide means of compensation for lost wildlife habitat values. That has never been done. I'm not even sure it's possible. And so what the discussion was, in a nutshell, was that we want to make sure that wildlife habitat values are part of the resource to be protected. And ad hoc committee couldn't come up with a simple way to do that, so we put it off.
There is in this regulatory, in 1987 regulatory revisions, at the back of the Wetlands Protection Act, there's an introduction on wildlife habitat is added to the interests protected by Mass General Law
Right.
13140. Wildlife habitat is defined in this 13140, but again, I could not find it. But it says the meaning is to be that those areas subject to Mass General Law 13040, which due to their plant community composition and structure, hydrologic regime, and other characteristics, provide important food, shelter, migratory or overwintering areas or breeding areas for wildlife. That's the whole definition.
And that's at the back of the reg?
Yep.
Can you give me the page, Rick?
It's page 17 in these, it's, they don't, it's not really, no way to, I guess it's 17 of, right here, the appendix. Appendices.
So this typed is what we have right now, right, Chuck?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Oh, is some of the type new?
Just basically the numbering.
Oh, she's talking, you can see where it's been changed. It's obvious.
Barbara has gotten there are two things. There's the original type statement, and Barbara's proposing.
Oh, I don't have that one.
You didn't get a copy of it?
It was in our package.
No, it wasn't.
No.
No.
Oh, it wasn't? I might be sitting on yours. I mean, another problem with the existing, I'm just coming up with problems now, not solutions, but
It's all right.
the new number 6, wildlife habitat characteristics on inland resource areas. Well, we really don't have jurisdiction over inland resource areas. We only have jurisdiction over wetlands and buffer zone.
Which paragraph is that?
Paragraph 6. I guess by resource area they mean wetland, but it's not clear.
And Barbara, you got this from Natural Heritage?
Most of it's from what we already have.
Okay, and the modifications?
My little circling
Yeah.
are just differences between what the state says and what ours says.
Okay,
New paragraph, and then I just renumbered the other ones.
okay.
So that that's already in our regulations.
When you say the state, you're referring to Wetlands Protection Act
Yep.
or another agency?
Mass Wetlands Protection Act.
Well, this looks like one, we're just simply gonna have to do some more research into it to try and find an appropriate,
Could I
why not?
float for the third, fourth time, each, or previous time it's been rejected? What we found in the ad hoc committee, we would have a topic, or sometimes two for a week. And how many of us were they, Barbara? 5, 6, 4, something like that. We'd read up on it a little bit, and then all of us would be relatively knowledgeable. Then when we discussed it, we combine our knowledge and we bounce things off each other. And we were able to, I thought it went, I'm biased, but I thought it went more smoothly than this is going in this committee. So even if the ad hoc committee is, for each issue, it's the entire Conservation Commission, that's fine.
Sure.
But to have a meeting with assigned homework on that one topic, and then we can bounce things off, and if somebody has an idea, get feedback and modify it. Similar to what we're doing now, but I guess not as part of a regular meeting, or maybe a somewhat smaller group. I don't know, just because this, I don't think this is going as well as I'd hoped.
Well, we certainly can assign wildlife habitat, although both you and I aren't gonna be here to participate
Right.
in that discussion.
Right.
It was assigned from our last meeting.
Well, that's what I
Right.
thought. But we can reassign it.
And I was, I didn't do my homework on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue. If the homework isn't done, you can't get there.
Right.
So it seems to me that what I would ask Chuck to do, Chuck, is to next time put wildlife habitat as the regulation discussion for our next meeting, even though I won't be here and Jamie won't be here, and see what progress we can make.
Maybe if we make a lot of progress, maybe that's telling us something, Bill.
Yeah, it could well be, could well be. And in the meantime, what I will do is re-render the vernal pool stuff to get it out to you all. Yep.
I think in order to get somewhere, we need to agree on where we're going. And I think what I'm hearing from the ad hoc committee is that the regulations are confusing, they're cumbersome, that they'd like them to be a little more like the state regulation. And that's where I'm trying to get, is more like the state regulation. And inserting or including things that are special and unique to Reading. But when they're not,
Right.
I don't find a need to include additional paragraphs and statements and words and everything else. I kind of see our regulation as almost an addendum to the Wetlands Protection Act. So if it's in the Wetlands Protection Act, leave it there. If it's not and we want to include it, put it in our reg. But not to repeat the stuff that's already in the Wetlands Protection Act. This is what's there today is 2 pages, and we're going to go to, or we're thinking of going to 3. I have to read through all this and
Yeah.
locate these things in here, and are they?
Right, my only concern is that we haven't, apparently, you haven't at this stage of the game, since you've done more research on this.
I haven't even been able to find the definition.
Well, that's right. And
Yeah.
in this case, therefore, we're sort of high and dry. We can't easily go to some state definition because we can't find it. So it would seem to me that there's a 2-step process. The first is,
No, I know. But my point is are we in agreement that we're trying to
I think we're in a-
simplify
right, I
and
think
make
we're-
this less confusion for the residents of Reading?
we're trying to.
And more consistent with
With the
the
state.
state,
Yes.
where there's not a
particular
distinct
interest.
reason to
Distinct
have
reason.
it different.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah, I
everyone's
think that's where-
agreement
I think
or
that's-
I
understanding?
think
I
that
think
is.
that's where we're trying to go, okay? And I don't think that intentionality, it ought to be to expand it unless we find the state regulations either mute, as they appear to be on this, on the issue of wildlife habitat. And we ought to find it. If there is a definition of wildlife habitat that we find acceptable, that the state has, we're to use it.
I think Barbara found it, because she highlights differences, right, Barbara?
Where, what, it's in the Wetlands Protection Act, is it
Looks
under a
like
certain
page
section?
105, 1060, is that right, Barbara?
Yep. Well, that's also the state, but the new number 4 and page 105, 1060. 1060 is the state, and then the
Well, then-
104 is what we have
Oh, I see, okay, all
already.
right, all
So
right.
it's both of them.
So it's 1062 is the state.
1060, section 2, yeah.
Okay, wildlife
Everything that
habitat.
is not in little bitty writing is ours.
The third page is out.
Ours, I think.
Oh, ours.
Yeah, that's the state that was not on our listing.
So the real, okay, the question then is, can we accept
Their definition for banks, land underwater, vernal pool, lower floodplains, river
So
front.
they're exactly the same as ours right now.
Right.
In which case, there's no reason to have ours.
To repeat them in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be what we look at and identify those differences, review those differences and identify them and say they're necessary.
Barbara, number 7 is little print. Is that ours or the
That's the
state's?
state's. That's, as I heard her say, that's the state.
Land underwater?
No, number
No,
7.
the restoration and replication
Right.
Yeah,
is the state.
Yeah.
man, we have never, I don't think we've ever required that.
You could know.
And okay, so it would seem to me that the assignment, to be very specific, is to review our current definition versus what we find in the state and try to simply decide whether we can wholly accept the state or whether we need to add or modify things which we think are particularly ready. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess,
All right.
one thing that is not clear to me, or is not clear in these regulations, if this applies just to resource area or to buffer zone also.
I think each resource area has a different type of habitat characteristics, and it lists those. I think they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is the way they're listed. A habitat on a bank is different than a habitat in.
Land underwater,
Right.
vernal pool, lower
Exactly.
floodplains,
Exactly.
riverfront areas, freshwater wetlands, etc.
But number 1, does that apply to buffer zone?
All resource areas.
Number 1
That's a-
here, written at the top.
No, excuse me, number 2, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
The new number 2, person's proposing to alter.
Right.
Correct. Does that apply just to resource areas or to buffer zone also? And if it's just resource areas, I'm not sure it's clear that that's the case.
Maybe that's why our regulations need to be changed, because that's right from our regulations, current regulations.
And there's no comparable statement in the state?
Doesn't appear to be.
Same, says the same
Well, I
thing.
think what we've got to do is, let's look at this, let's, to the degree that people can get state sightings for each of these areas. If we're, because I agree with Tom, we don't want to write anything that we agree with as well-defined within the state. Right, okay?
And the difficulty is, if something is not defined in the state regs, then we may choose not to, but we may choose that because of special situations in Reading, we want to write a regulation about that. But it would seem to me that certainly on the stuff that, where the state regs, page 105, 1062, are clear and acceptable, we ought to use them. And just stop wasting additional words.
Well, that one you're referring to, which is the new number 4, that is saying what activities are not subject to
Right.
wildlife considerations.
Right.
Now, how do we make it clear in our regulations that that same constraint applies to our regulations? Do we say anything in the state regulations that says it's not of concern is not a concern for our regulations?
Yeah, I think, you know, what we ought to probably do, again, is to say that in this area, we adopt the following state definitions, state regulations, and exemptions from regulations.
And exemptions from regulations.
And then simply cite, and that's my concern here.
Cite the appropriate paragraph and
The rest of the
section.
Right.
That works.
Yeah, the state kind of, I think, handles the new 4 in this measuring adverse effects on wildlife habitat. And it references you to other sections for thresholds, rather than, and maybe they're the same thresholds as these, I don't know.
They seem familiar,
Don't
so I
have,
think
you
they
have
are.
to read through.
I mean, the 10,000 square, or the
The
5,000
is
square
certainly
feet.
one, yeah.
Okay, so we've got an assignment for next meeting. Sorry I won't be here, sorry you won't be here. Hope you'll have a quorum.
Or none of us will be here.
None of us will be.
I think
Is there any desire or any willingness to tackle one of the 2 critical issues, at least to the first cut, before our end of February presentation to the board? And those 2 contentious or difficult issues are fee structure and isolated wetlands.
Is the fee structure something that you would have go up, or are you taking some stuff out?
I think simplify is the code word, and provide some caps. I mean, what was some of those? If you calculate fees by square feet, sometimes it comes out to ridiculously high number.
or linear foot of delineation.
We had somebody in here $25,000.
Right. I mean, we chose not to apply.
We chose not to, but it would be nice to have those. We shouldn't have to issue an exemption every time that ridiculousness comes out, and it's complicated.
Well, I think we ought to tackle fees,
Okay,
because I think it's hard, and I think we ought to try to tackle fees.
I think that would be good.
With an attempt to simplify them, and/or cap them, and/or do both. And I think, again, based on lots of years, the areas where the cap would seem to apply would be in single-family homes. Very different situation than somebody putting in, 10 houses or Johnson Woods or everything else. I think we ought to cap fees for single-family homes.
Yeah, I think an easy way to do it is to use a multiplier based on the state filing fee with a cap. So they just take the state filing fee, multiply it times some fraction, or a whole number, whatever the magnitude is that we think is appropriate, and
What-
cap it at, what we think is appropriate for a single-family house, let's say.
I think that's a reasonable idea. What would be very, very helpful to me if somebody or some group of 2 or 3 people would stand up at our meeting and make a 10-minute presentation as to what our current fee structure is, and then a proposal for how we could change it.
Wow, you were really, you think someone could actually discuss our fee proposal in 10 minutes?
Well, we have a chart.
Or however long it
We've
takes.
got a chart.
But I
There's a chart.
think that would make it a rational process. Because I think to propose changes to our fee structure, if we don't understand them, which are sitting here tonight, I do not, would be presumptuous, if not stupid.
Interestingly enough, of the 2, 4, 6 other towns, 5 other towns in this area, fee structure is almost exactly the same as ours. Some are higher
But
for some of the
the,
things.
but the approach is similar?
Yeah.
Yeah, the other problem we've got is we only have one meeting between now and the 28th, which is the one that you and I are going to be at.
Oh, really? We
Yeah,
don't,
because we don't meet on Ash Wednesday, Washington's birthday. According to my reading, we're meeting on the 29th, so
That's right.
oh,
there ain't no way we're gonna have that presentation.
you're right, forget it then.
Okay.
But there was one other thing
Yep.
that I said I would do is look at, and Chuck gave me the Word file for the Reading bylaw, and I copied out of the Wetlands Protection Act all of the definitions of both ours and theirs, and have compared them. And I'll leave a couple more copies with Chuck, so you could probably put it in the packages with the folks that aren't here. And it's just a comparison of the language of our regulation to state regulation. Some of them are exactly the same. Some of them add a word, delete a word, add an additional statement. In my opinion, there aren't too many that are necessary, because I believe the state adequately describes and discusses it. But, you know, I would ask that everyone take a read of it and see if they see that same type of thing. There are, in some cases, this third column to the right here seems blank, but once in a while there's a definition in the state regulation that references you back to Mass General Law 131, Section 40.
So the second column are the regulations, not the law.
The first column is the Reading
Right,
bylaw
and
definitions.
and the second,
Is Mass Wetland Protection Act,
the act or the regulations?
the Act.
And then what's the third
The
column?
third column is Mass General Law 133, Section 4.
Isn't that the act?
No, the Act is, well, the regulations are CMR 31010. The regulation, the
So
law
these are
is-
from the regulations, second column?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. What's referred to as the Wetlands Protection Act.
And when you say these are the first column is the bylaw, not the regulation definitions.
I'm sorry, it should be the Reading regulation
Okay.
definitions, yeah.
Because
So
as
they
of the
were well,
last,
as of still, they're, well,
as of the last town meeting, there are no definitions
That's
in
right.
in the bylaw.
yep.
Yeah, they are, 90% of them are the same. Little word here and there, or some
Okay.
stuff like that is,
Chuck, why don't you add that to the task list, and I'll try to do what I can before I go away. Okay?
again, another thing that's kind of silly to have in ours if they're the same as the states,
Right.
because it's just several,
Absolutely, no question.
multiple
So you want me to
pages
add the
of.
fee structure to the task list?
No.
No,
Don't think we can do the
No.
fee structure.
What are we doing?
We're doing, asking everybody to do a comparison of the Reading regulation definitions and the Mass Wetland Protection Act definitions, to see if there are any places where we wish to not essentially adopt the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act regulation definition. Because it seems to me if we can adopt, if the wording is essentially the same, adopting the state definitions simplifies our life.
Like 5 pages out of our,
Right. Among other things.
among us.
Looking further down, is regulations, I mean, fee structure, would that be the next one?
either that, there are three
Really contentious ones.
contents, fee structure, isolated wetlands, and how we define a wetland.
Okay. And when, just a question for me. I've heard this term isolated wetlands before, and I cannot find a definition of that one, so I don't know what people mean by that one. Is that in our regulation?
It is in our regulation.
Is it, I don't, just, I don't see it mentioned, I don't see it defined.
The
I don't
word
see-
isn't in there, and help me out, Barbara, because we went around and around on this. There's a clause in, no, it's in the
Can't think of
bylaws.
where.
It's in the bylaws, and it says the definition, or the definition of wetland is not, oh, what's the term? Is not contingent on continuity or something like that. It doesn't use the word isolated, but we went through this with town council also. What it means is it doesn't have to be connected to a waterway.
Right.
There does not have to be an hydraulic.
Yeah, and I think I might have it in my notes somewhere, Tom, but you're right, it's not immediately obvious, but it is indeed in there.
But you think it's in the bylaw, not?
I think it's in the bylaw. And what we asked town council, can we leave that in our bylaw and limit the size in our regulations?
Yeah.
And she said yes.
So
Well,
all
it
we-
seems, you know, the idea, it seems to me, is subsequent, we ought to have an assignment for the 29th, by which time I will have recovered some sanity and be able to present an assignment. And I'll pick one of the tough ones. Whether we want to pick fees or something else.
Yeah, I just look at, if I have free time between now and then, I'd like to get onto it, and, because I may not have free time the week before the meeting, and,
Well-
would want to be able to finish it. So that's why I was just saying, if fees is next, I'll go to fees, and
Yeah,
then we can
fees
pick.
is probably next.
Okay.
Let's try fees and see what we can do.
And the isolated wetlands, I don't think is gonna be contentious at all, I think, because it would normally fit under freshwater wetlands, because that's what it would be.
Yeah,
You
but
don't have any,
the issue is, what we had contemplated was
Yeah.
saying one's less than 100 square feet or some number
right,
would not be
Qualify.
subject to,
Regulation.
to regulation.
right.
But those over that size would be.
Mhm.
And how do we set the size?
Well, yeah, and that's clearly a lengthy discussion about two sets of issues. One, if we don't have a good definition, and we want to put it in there, we need a good definition, a better definition. If it isn't in state regs, it isn't in state regs, we want a better definition. And number two, size limiting is fine, but that seems to me to be not necessarily a testy discussion, but a lengthy discussion.
The challenge
now-
is gonna be coming up with the size that's not arbitrary and capricious.
Right now, the regulations have a 5,000 square feet.
But that's for alteration.
Any proposed work that may alter
Yeah.
shall not destroy or otherwise impair any portion of the area. However, we can issue an order of conditions permitting work that results in the alteration of less than 5,000 square feet,
Right.
provided we meet all these requirements.
Okay.
But this isolated wetland has hydric soil, it has plants, it has water.
It
Or-
meets whatever definition we use for bordering vegetated wetlands. It's just not connected to
Why
a
is-
stream.
Okay, so it doesn't meet the state's definition of a hydraulic
Correct.
connection.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
How about 573? I'm not gonna
What's-
read the whole thing, but that's in the bylaw.
What does it say?
573, page 50. Well, I'm not sure I have the same bylaw. It's page 52.
Let's not try to invent it on the fly.
Well, no, I just would like to find it so I can read it and understand it, and I've been impossible to find.
Is this what you guys had checked out? Said resource area shall be protected whether or not they border surface waters?
Yes, is that in the bylaws?
That's what I just,
Yeah, that's it,
So that's in 573.
5.7.3,
of the bylaws.
the wetland protection.
And
Is that ours
Another-
or the?
Yeah, it's ours.
fundamental reason for that
Pages.
is
52.
the disconnected
52.
pond areas in town, which used to be hydraulically Lieutenant?
I don't know if there's a
My stuff only
52.
goes
All
to
which have
48.
wetland characteristics.
I got this off of,
Okay,
the town bylaw. that
Tom, you got
includes
your-
bylaw for the entire
Comfortable
town.
with
Ah,
what you need to look at?
Yeah, we're gonna,
Okay.
wildlife,
Is there 5,
these
7, 3?
definitions, and, after that, we're moving on to fees next.
Right. Okay, fine.
we have 5, A, B, C, D, E, F.
I will
Notice-
entertain a
not
motion to
Notice of
adjourn.
intent.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Let's adjourn. All right,